Once you've had a chance to review that, Lieutenant, if you look up at me when you're done.
All set, sir.
So you'd agree with me that the 2:32 p.m. phone call with Lieutenant Tully is in the Daily Journal, correct?
Yes, it is.
And the 2:53 p.m. alert by Sergeant Simpson is also in the journal, correct?
Yes, it is.
Both of those have a timestamp, do they not?
They do, sir.
What is the next entry on that journal?
It says, "Cert activated en route to Canton."
Now, there is no time entry next to that. I'm sorry, no time is entered next to that entry, correct?
There is not, no.
The previous alert said only to clear the vehicles and driveways, essentially, right? To check on availability?
Correct, sir.
So the time that your team is alerted was entered in the journal, but there is no time entered in this journal as to when you were dispatched, correct?
Correct, sir.
But you have a memory of after that 2:53 p.m. alert sent out by Sergeant Simpson that Lieutenant Tully called you back about an hour later?
It's not a memory, sir. Our alert for the team to respond is time-stamped at 3:48 p.m.
Okay, and that was Sergeant Simpson that recorded that, correct?
Correct, sir.
But that's not in the Daily Journal, correct?
No, that's in the Health and Homeland Alert Network, which records all our alerts that get sent out, and that was time-stamped at 3:48.
3:48, okay. Now, other than authorization that would have been obtained after the 2:53 p.m. alert, did you ever ascertain what else changed on the part of the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit that allowed you now to have the green light?
Once I was done cleaning my driveway off, which took a significant amount of time, I spoke to my captain. He said we were approved through our chain of command, and that's when either I contacted Lieutenant Tully or he called me. He said he was approved through his chain of command to include the deputy superintendent who was authorizing a response.
Okay,
So there's several layers of the chain of command that have to approve a response for numerous reasons. Staffing reasons, they know I'm going to be pulling, again, I said some of my team members aren't full-time members. Some of them I have to pull off their assignments. So if they're on patrol, I'll now be shorting a barracks. They take that into consideration, overtime consideration, safety consideration of now additional members driving through the whether to respond. So that all gets discussed at levels above us.
all right. That answer applied to strictly issues regarding authorization on both ends, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. You recall my question, which was, other than authorization, did you learn what, if anything, had changed in that time period from 2:53 p.m. to 3:48 p.m. on the part of the Norfolk State Police Detectives Unit?
No, sir. We just talked about the authorization process.
Sometime shortly before 4 o'clock, you're talking about 3:48 being the alert authorizing you to depart. Sometime before 4, Sergeant Simpson informed your team to start heading to Canton and to report to you, correct?
Correct, sir.
That meant that team members should basically stop what they're doing, the ones who are going to be going, get their gear ready, suit up, get in a car, and start driving to Canton to meet up with you, correct?
Correct, sir.
And we've already discussed that on this particular day with blizzard conditions and the roads as they existed, that would obviously take more time than it would on a clear sunny day, correct?
Correct, sir.
And I believe your estimation is maybe about a 20-minute drive in good weather with good roads versus the 43 minutes it actually took you to get there, correct?
Correct.
Now, the 7 members of your team who did show up were Bearden, Beausoleil, Carrier, Louise, O'Brien, you, and Viscardi, correct?
Correct, sir.
You all arrived at about the same time, sir?
No, we had a pretty significant difference between arrival times.
Okay. Is there something called a personnel status report that records arrival times, sir?
No, it doesn't record arrival times. We just enter who's responding. We use our geotab, which is our vehicle locator, to determine arrival times.
Is it your testimony? Let's get back to the podium. Is it your testimony that the personnel status report does not record the date and time that somebody arrived on scene?
No, that's all manually entered, sir.
Do you deny that the personnel status report in this case recorded the date and time of each of those officers that I just mentioned who came on scene?
It has who arrived on scene, yes, sir.
But it doesn't just say who arrived on scene. The personnel status report says when they arrived on scene, correct?
Yeah, it's whenever they would have been entered into the system, but that doesn't mean they were officially on scene yet,
All
sir.
right, but again, that's not what the document says, right? It doesn't say we're entering this into the system because they're arriving. The document says on scene and it gives a date and time, does it not?
Yes, it does, sir.
All right. Now, your testimony is, oh, and by the way, the personnel status report, you'd agree with me, has everybody except for you and Beausoleil showing up at 5 p.m. on January 29th of 2022, does it not?
Yes, it does, sir.
And it has you and Beausoleil showing up 5 minutes before that at 4:55 p.m. on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
But it's your testimony that when you got there, it was just you and Beausoleil, correct?
Correct, sir.
Which actually would be consistent with the personnel status report, right?
Yes, sir.
Because that has you two showing up first as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And then your testimony is that other members didn't show up until between 5:20 and 5:24 p.m.?
Trooper Bearden arrived at 5:21. Sergeant Luis and Sergeant O'Brien arrived at 5:24. Trooper Viscardi showed up at 5:34. Sergeant Carrier showed up at 5:41.
Okay, and so the last member of your team, which is, again, Carrier?
Carrier, correct, sir, 5:41.
He showed up at 5:41, and now your team was all there, correct?
Yes, sir.
So is it your testimony that you did not meet up as a team somewhere and head to 34 Fairview? You all arrived individually.
That's correct, sir.
Did every single trooper who arrived have their own cruiser?
Yes, they did, sir.
All right. Now, you would agree with me that when Lieutenant Tully first contacted you at 2:32 p.m., it was still daytime, correct?
Yes, it was.
So it was light out, correct?
Yes, sir.
You'd agree with me that at around 5 o'clock on this late January day in Massachusetts, it was dark out by the time you got there, correct?
Yes, it was.
So when you finally arrived on scene, after getting your team getting the green light, it was dark for the start of your search, correct?
Yes, it was.
When you got there, you set up a command post.
Oh, you could call my cruiser command post, sure, sir.
Well, I didn't use the term command post, sir, did I?
You did not.
Who used it first?
We marked my cruiser as a command post on the map, sir.
Okay, all right. And a command post is a base of operations at the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you parked your cruiser basically in front of the driveway at 34 Fairview to serve as the command post?
Yes, right side of the driveway, yes, sir.
And you were initially facing away from the flagpole when you did that?
Yes, sir.
Which would mean that your cruiser was parked technically on the wrong side of the street facing Cedar Crest because you were against 34 Fairview?
Correct, sir.
And then ultimately turned it around?
Well, yes, myself and Trooper Beausoleil moved our vehicles.
All right, and you initially parked there in part because you wanted to keep the area where you were searching clear of vehicles, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was where you met at the, we'll call it a command post because you did, your cruiser. That was where you met to discuss the parameters of the search?
When Detective Lieutenant Tully arrived on scene, that's where we spoke.
Okay. And you would agree with me that it was Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detectives Unit who told you where to look and what to look for, correct?
Correct. He told us the area he thought would be the best probability to find what we were looking for.
In addition to your team, the 7 of you, you noted that there were 5 other officers on scene at various points, correct?
Yeah, I believe it was about 5, sir.
They were all in uniform?
They were not.
Some were in plain clothes?
They were.
And you didn't know who those 5 other officers were, correct?
I only recognized 2 of them, sir.
And so the other 3, you didn't know if they were state police or Canton police?
Correct, sir.
At that point, were you made aware that the Canton police had been conflicted out of this investigation?
I had not, no, sir.
All right. Now, Lieutenant Tully directed you to an area where he said that John O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
He directed us to where he believed the vehicle involved had been parked and to where the victim's body was recovered.
All right. So again, in answer to my question, he did direct you to an area where he believed the victim's body was found, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he told you that he believed that the victim officer was hit and dragged by a motor vehicle, correct?
Yeah, I believe he might have said possibly dragged.
All right. But in terms of your paperwork on the case, there's something called a final mission report, correct?
Yes, there is, sir.
And what is the final mission report?
That's just a brief summary of the actions conducted by CERT during our assignment.
And with regard to, just going back for a second, with regard to those 5 officers, you mentioned that you recognized 2 of the 5 officers that were in plainclothes at the scene?
Correct, sir.
And what departments were they from?
The only 2 I recognized were from the state police.
Okay. Now, getting back to the final mission report, you called it a brief summary of what you had done with regard to the search, correct?
Yes, sir.
Just because it's brief doesn't mean that it should be inaccurate, correct?
Correct, sir.
It's important with regard to anything that you submit on this case that you be as accurate as possible, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you try to be, correct?
Do our best, sir.
Right. And there is an entry, well, there are 6 different categories on, or I should say 7 different categories on the final mission report. The first being the mission name, which you entered as the Canton evidence search, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate. The evidence search occurred, and it occurred in Canton, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you also put the date and time of the first call, and you entered that as January 29th of 2022 at 2:32 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate, because you've testified that's when Lieutenant Tully contacted you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there's a entry or a question or a box that says general terrain, and you entered that as neighborhood, snow-covered street, and front lawn, correct?
Correct, sir.
And that was accurate, right?
Yes, sir.
And in terms of incident type, you entered evidence search, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a final mission report that talks about your mission and starts with, 7 CERT members, and that's the CERT team, right?
Yes, sir.
7 CERT members responded to the scene, and it talks about, the snow in the area where the victim's body was found, the plows hadn't cleared the street, et cetera, et cetera. That paragraph is accurate as well, correct?
Yes, it is, sir.
And then there's a final mission report by, and it gives your name, Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara, and it has your accurate badge number, which is 3042, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, everything that we've just discussed in terms of what you put in your final mission report was entered accurately, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the final category is general description of mission, and would you agree with me that you entered, the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.?
I don't remember exactly how it's worded, sir. If I could,
May I approach,
it.
Your Honor?
Yes.
It's been a recurring theme. Do you need
I do
reading
not.
glasses? You
I do
don't.
not,
Okay.
sir.
All right, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. All set, sir. Thank you.
I may approach?
Yes.
Lieutenant, having read that portion of the final mission report, is your memory refreshed?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right, and did you enter in there, the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.?
Yes, it is. I did, sir.
All right. Now, with regard to the area that, or I should say, Lieutenant Tully's direction to you to search the area where the victim's body was found, Lieutenant Tully never informed you that he was actually present and saw the victim's body in that spot, did he?
He did not, no, sir.
Did you mark the place where John O'Keefe's body was found with GPS coordinates?
We did not. He wasn't no longer on scene, sir, so I think that would have been not 100% accurate.
Okay. You also mentioned that Lieutenant Tully directed you to the area where the SUV had been parked, correct?
To where the vehicle was believed to have been parked, yes, sir.
At that time, did you know it was an SUV or not?
I did not, sir.
All right. But in any case, Lieutenant Tully didn't tell you that he ever saw the vehicle parked in the area to which he directed you, correct?
He did not say that he saw it there, no, sir.
So Lieutenant Tully told you to look for a man's sneaker, correct?
That was one of the items missing, yes, sir.
And he told you to look for red and clear plastic pieces of taillight, correct?
He just said taillight, didn't say red clear, but taillight pieces.
Okay. Did Lieutenant Tully give you approval not just to search outside the house, but also inside the house?
No, we never discussed searching inside the house, sir.
And you had mentioned during your testimony that you confirmed that the homeowner was there, right? Because he came out of the house at one point?
I don't know if it was the homeowner, but an adult male exited the house while we were there, sir.
Sure. And he appeared to live at that home, correct? Let me just have a moment. All right. Now, with regard to the area that you were searching, you would agree with me that Lieutenant Tully was the one who directed you where to search and what to search for, correct?
He gave us the best idea for the search area, yes, sir.
All right, and it was based on his direction that you created a grid and began your search?
He told us where he believed the vehicle was parked and where the victim's body was found, and I decided how far of a distance we would search.
Okay. So that's another way of saying it was based on his direction that you created a grid and began your search, correct?
Yeah, I based it off of the information he provided, yes, sir.
So the answer is yes.
I guess so, sir.
This was not the first time that you and your team have done a search in the snow, correct?
Not for evidence. We had never done a search like this before, just for missing person searches.
I see. But in any case, you've been trained to search winter crime scenes that have snow, correct?
Correct, sir.
There are proper techniques for conducting such searches during or after a snowfall, correct?
Yeah, we have best practices we use.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Yes,
you.
we have best practices we use, sir.
Of course. Best practices would include documenting the scene and the area to be searched with photographs and diagrams, correct?
Yes, sir.
It would also include using, gentle methods to remove snow, correct?
Yeah, the best way you can, yes, sir.
That might include, smaller hand tools, brushes, gloved hands.
Only if you would have a real small area.
It would include removing snow layer by layer and then sifting it and documenting evidence again for each layer that's removed.
Yeah, I believe that's how we went through, sir. We went slowly, methodically, and sifting through the snow as we progressed down the area. Correct.
And best practices would mean documenting by photographs along the way the progress of your search, would it not?
That would be up to the detectives or the crime scene unit, sir.
Well, but you were the one who was making those decisions, correct?
Not for documentation purposes. No, that's not our responsibility, sir.
Okay. But you would agree with me that it would be advisable to document your search in that way, would it not?
That would be at the discretion of the detective, sir.
Okay. Well, would it harm your search in any way to fully document it along the way?
It would not harm it, no, sir.
You want to take your time and work methodically and thoroughly in the search, correct?
Correct, sir.
And you want to collect evidence as it's located and immediately photograph it in place before it's disturbed, correct?
Yeah, as evidence is discovered, it will get photographed in place. Yes, sir.
During your search in this case, your team found a sneaker and pieces of red and clear plastic, correct?
Correct, sir.
The evidence that you found was basically on top of each other, within a few inches of each other, correct?
Within a foot or two, a couple feet, yes, sir.
Well, you testified at a prior proceeding in this matter, did you not?
I did, sir.
And you were sworn to tell the truth during that prior proceeding as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that testimony was closer in time to the search that you conducted on January 29th than today is, correct?
Yes, it was, sir.
And your memory would have been better then than it is today, correct?
Probably, sir.
You were asked the question, quote, and as far as the red and clear glass you believed consistent with the taillight, was that found in the same area as the sneaker or somewhere else? Do you recall that question?
I believe being asked that question, yes, sir.
And your answer was same area within a few inches, less than a foot, correct?
Correct, sir.
Now, you mapped out GPS coordinates for what you found?
One of the team members did, yes, sir.
Your team did.
Yes, sir.
And Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit was present during the search, correct?
Yes, he was.
And he was the one that was photographing the items that were found?
Yes, he did.
So I'd like to ask you a few questions about your observations about where these items were found in relation to each other. Was there a piece of red plastic located on the roadway left of the flagpole when you look at the house from the street?
Left of the flagpole. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, given your testimony about these items essentially being in the same area less than a foot away from each other, it could not be true then that from that red piece of plastic that was found in the street, that 3 feet south of that was a black Nike sneaker found under the snow. That couldn't have happened, correct?
Well, I don't know where the distance between the objects as far as the mapping purposes, sir, but as far as how far apart, the first thing we discovered was one red piece of plastic, and then further south, that's when we found the sneaker and additional pieces.
Right, but again, they were all in the same area, less than a foot apart, correct?
Same general area, but it could have been over a foot, sir. I'd have to measure between the GPS markings.
Okay, well, so is your testimony today that what you testified to in that prior proceeding, where everything was less than a foot apart, that wasn't accurate?
Objection.
Allow it. Is that your testimony, sir?
Best recollection that they were within around a foot, but to be 100% accurate, you would have to measure between the two GPS points, which I have not done.
Sure, but if your estimate is you didn't even say a foot, you said less than a foot, correct?
I believe that's what you read, around a foot, yes, sir.
Which is what you testified to, correct?
Correct, sir.
So if it's less than a foot, then by definition, the sneaker couldn't have been found 3 feet south of where that red piece of plastic was, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's accurate, sir.
You don't know what's accurate.
Where you're saying 3 feet, I don't know if that's accurate, sir.
No, that's what I'm asking you. Is it accurate?
I don't know, sir. I'm not sure the exact distance. I didn't measure the GPS marking, sir. I'm not.
All right.
I don't know. I didn't know where you came up with that number 3 feet, sir.
I'm just asking questions.
Okay.
I'm just asking questions. All right, so with regard to, let's assume for a moment that the sneaker was found 3 feet south of that first red piece of plastic. From your observations, was there a clear piece of plastic that was found a few feet south of that black sneaker?
There was a piece of clear plastic found just past the sneaker.
A few feet south of the sneaker?
I don't know where you're getting that from, sir.
Again, you don't have to worry where my questions are coming
So,
from.
Mr. Yannetti, no comments. Next
Sure.
question.
I'm just asking a factual question. You were there, I was not.
Mr. Yannetti, just ask the
Yes.
question.
Was a clear piece of plastic found a few feet south of the black sneaker, which was found 3 feet south of the red piece of plastic? Did that happen?
I don't know the distance, sir. No, not without measuring it. But I wouldn't think it was that far of a distance. They were much closer than that.
Right, I mean, you say you don't know the distance, but you testified to what the distance was in that prior proceeding, did you not?
Objection.
Next question, please.
All right. And then, moving along, we have the red piece of plastic, 3 feet south, black sneaker, a few feet south, clear plastic, then finally, several feet south of that clear piece of plastic, was there a second piece of red plastic found, several feet south?
No, again, I don't agree with your description of the distance, sir.
Okay, all right, so we will agree that, one piece of red plastic, 3 feet south sneaker, a few feet south clear piece of plastic, and then several feet south more red plastic. That didn't happen, correct?
I don't agree on those distances, no, sir.
No, okay. Now, you testified that these items were buried under some snow, correct?
Correct, sir. They were under snow.
May I have those exhibits, please? Okay, can I display exhibit 113, please?
All right, the jury needs to take a break. Why don't we
Oh, sure.
why don't we have this be our morning assessment? So we'll take about 15, 20.
All rise for the court, please. Follow me, please.
Thank you. Be seated. Put us back in session.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Nettie, you can go back to the podium.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant O'Hara, you testified on direct examination that you collected 6 or 7 pieces of plastic, correct?
I believe that's what we found, yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that it's important to be precise in your investigation and your search?
Yes, why Lieutenant Tully took an evidence log, sir.
All right. So as you testify here today, 2.5 years later, can you tell the jury whether it was 6 or 7 of the pieces of plastic that you actually found?
I've never seen the evidence log from that night, sir, so I'm not sure exactly how many he recovered. Again, I was partaking in the search, so I'm not sure what the exact number is, sir.
And you would agree with me that you only mapped 3 of them on the map that was introduced here at trial, correct?
Correct.
And again, that was because the pieces were essentially on top of each other, correct?
Correct. As you would mark them on the GPS, they were marking almost directly on top of each other, and we knew that was going to...
And they certainly were not being marked feet away from each other, several feet, correct?
No, sir.
All right. And you are aware that Lieutenant Tully photographed 5 pieces of plastic that day, are you not?
I'm not sure. I'd never seen the photos until probably about a week ago, sir.
All right. In any case, you did say to the State Police Detective Unit at the end of this search that if they wanted you and your team to come back out during daylight hours, you would, correct?
Correct, sir.
So I'd like to direct your attention to 6 specific dates, and then I'll ask you a question. February 3rd, February 4th, February 8th, February 10th, February 11th, and February 18th. Those 6 dates. And my question is, did the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, ever call you on one of those 6 dates to come back to the scene to conduct a further search?
No, he did not.
I have nothing further.
Okay. Redirect, Mr. Lally?
Just briefly, Your Honor. So, Lieutenant O'Hara, with respect to both yourself and Lieutenant Tully, as far as being dispatched, that decision comes from above both of your heads with respect to each of your units. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, sir.
Now, you were asked some questions about a daily journal. Can you describe for the jury sort of what that is or what kind of information would typically be kept in that?
That would just be our day-to-day activities. We'll give a quick gist of what we're doing each day. Be more general than, doesn't get too thorough.
Now, you had made mention during your testimony of some other documentation that would be more specific. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And what would some of those be, and how would that be more specific?
That's a report that gets generated through our mission manager software, so it creates a little bit more detailed response.
And are you familiar with an AVL?
I am, yes, sir.
And what is an AVL?
It's the Geotab GPS on the cruiser's automatic vehicle locator system.
And the vehicle that you were operating that day, was that equipped with an AVL?
Yes, it was, sir.
And is that how you're able to tell the precise time of your arrival on scene,
Correct, sir.
as well as each member of your unit? Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Now, as far as the items and where they were, again, I just asked from the photographs that were marked as exhibits before, where the items were when they were located by members of your team, they were photographed as they lay. Is that correct?
Correct, sir. As they were discovered, they were photographed.
So regardless of inches versus feet versus whatever distance it was, you didn't measure that. Is that correct?
We did not, no, sir.
But as far as where they were actually discovered or where they were recovered, they were photographed where they were when you found them, correct?
Correct, sir.
Nothing further.
All right. All right, Lieutenant, you are all set, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Need this journal back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Yannetti, this is your paperwork, I believe. All right, Mr. Lally, your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth will call Ms. Maureen Hartnett to the stand.
You step right up here and just watch your step for me.
Do you solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now and hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Maureen Hartnett, Hartnett.
All right, Ms. Hartnett, I know I'm going to ask you throughout this to keep your voice up, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And Ms. Hartnett, what do you do for work?
I'm a forensic scientist too with the Criminalistics Unit and Crime Scene Response Unit at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
And how long in total have you been with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
In total, approximately 8 years.
And I'm going to ask you some questions just a little bit about your educational background. Where did you go as far as your undergraduate was concerned?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Bridgewater State University.
And following receipt of that degree, where did you go from there?
I have a Master of Science in Forensic Science from the University of New Haven.
And after you received your master's, where did you go after that?
I was then hired by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
And when you're initially hired, you mentioned that you're a forensic scientist too now, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So when you're initially hired, or when you were initially hired at the State Crime Lab, what was your position and what did that entail?
Are you referring to back in 2004 or in my current hire?
You're back in 2004.
In 2004, I was originally hired as a temporary employee in the CODIS unit.
And what is it that you did there?
I collected blood samples for the DNA database.
And did you receive any sort of training in regard to that work?
Yes, I was trained on how to properly collect and seal those samples.
And what did training sort of consist of in reference to that?
I demonstrated being able to take those collections and then properly store them and seal them.
Now, your current position, what is your position at the crime lab now?
Currently, I'm a forensic scientist too in the Criminalistics Unit and Crime Scene Response Units.
And what is sort of the difference between a forensic scientist 2 versus a forensic scientist 1?
A forensic scientist 1 is still in training at the crime lab.
And did you start as a forensic scientist 1 when you came into this particular unit?
Yes, I did.
And about how long a period or process is it from the time that you start as a forensic scientist 1 before you become a forensic scientist 2?
It took me approximately 9 to 10 months to be signed off to be a forensic scientist too.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what goes on as far as that process is concerned, going from a forensic scientist 1 to a forensic scientist 2?
During that time period, we are being trained in the various types of analysis that we'll perform in the Criminalistics Unit.
And what exactly does that training sort of consist of?
The training is broken up into modules, which addresses each type of analysis. At the end of each module, we take a written exam, an oral exam, and a hand-on practical exam. Once each module is successfully completed, we'll move on to the next module.
And what are your duties as a forensic scientist in the Criminalistics Unit and the Crime Scene Response Unit?
In the Criminalistics Unit, I examine items of evidence submitted by law enforcement personnel or crime scene responders for the presence of biological fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva, as well as trace materials such as hairs and fibers. I also perform gunshot residue collection and damage analysis.
And with respect to the Crime Scene Response Unit?
For the Crime Scene Response Unit, I respond to crime scenes. I document crime scenes, analyze or test evidence, preserve the evidence, and then transport that evidence back to the crime lab.
And now, with reference to your training experience, specifically in the crime scene response unit, what is, based on your training experience, what is sort of the definition of what is a crime scene?
A crime scene is any location that may contain evidence related to a crime.
Now, with regard to those two positions, what, if any, training did you receive in regard to those two units that you're currently in while you were at the lab?
I'm sorry, are you speaking about the crime scene training specifically?
Crime scene training, yes. Let me ask you first to start with the criminalistics training.
The criminalistics training, I completed modules on body fluid identification, such as blood and semen, trace analysis, identification of hairs and fibers, pattern evidence, such as bloodstain pattern evidence, as well as damage analysis.
And as far as the training was concerned with regard to the crime scene response.
I received training in proper documentation using sketches and diagrams of the scene. I also received training in trace collection at crime scenes, as well as gunshot residue collection at crime scenes.
Now, the crime lab that you work for, is that lab accredited?
Yes, it is.
And what does that, as far as accreditation, what does that mean?
Accreditation is a voluntary quality assurance process that the laboratory is a part of, or an outside body evaluates our crime lab to ensure that our personnel, procedures, and instruments are held to certain scientific standards.
And the outside sort of vendor or the outside accrediting agency, who is that in regard to the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Our laboratory is accredited by ANAB, which stands for ANSI National Accreditation Board, and ANSI is another acronym that stands for American National Standards Institute.
And as far as that accreditation is concerned, how often is that something that that your lab undergoes, or is there a certain audit process? How is accreditation sort of achieved?
We are audited, I believe, I want to say every 2 years, but I'm not 100% sure. They come out to the lab and they go through certain systems or have a certain scope in which they audit us. We also do internal audits as well.
And as far as that accreditation is concerned, is that something that was up to date in the month of January of 2022?
Yes, it was.
And is it up to date currently as well?
Yes.
Now, your work, I believe you just alluded to this as far as your testimony, but does your work go through some sort of review process?
Yes, every assignment that I complete goes through both a technical review process and an administrative review process.
Can you explain a little bit about what each of those is and what it means?
A technical review process is done by an independent analyst, either a peer or a supervisor, who will look through my file and determine whether or not they can come to the same conclusions that I came to based on my notes.
Are you familiar, based on your training and experience within the lab, of something called a proficiency test?
Yes, I am.
And can you explain to the jury what is your understanding? What is a proficiency test?
Proficiency tests are given in the different types of analysis that we do at the lab to ensure that we are maintaining our competency in that type of analysis.
And about how often are these administered, or how often do you take proficiency tests?
For biological fluid identification, I take 2 per year. For trace identification, I take 1 per year. And for crime scene response, I take 1 per year.
And these proficiency tests, are they required by the accrediting body, ANAB, that you were referring to?
Yes, they are.
And did you take a proficiency test in hair and fiber identification in 2022?
Yes, I did.
And what was the outcome of that proficiency test?
That was successfully completed and required a remediation.
Can you explain to the jury what remediation is and why this specific proficiency test required remediation?
A remediation occurs when you have an inconsistent answer with that is expected by the laboratory or by the test provider. In this particular instance, I had an inconsistent answer with the expected laboratory result.
And how was the remediation completed in this instance?
After the inconsistent answer was identified by my technical leader, we had a verbal discussion about why I came to the conclusion I did. To be more specific, each item had 2 samples. One of the samples for item 4, I determined as being a human hair without a root, when in fact the root was present. We had a discussion on how I came to that conclusion, and then she mounted that hair back on the microscope, and we discussed different ways that I could have come to the correct conclusion.
During that remediation process, were you permitted to continue to perform casework during that time?
Yes, I was. I was permitted to continue to perform casework in hair and fiber identification. However, I was temporarily asked to not perform technical reviews of my peers' work on hair and fiber identification.
And was prior casework that you had completed evaluated to verify that the previous reports were issued correctly?
Yes, they were.
And what was the determination in regard to that?
No previous casework was affected by this error.
And have you since completed additional proficiency tests in hair and fiber identification?
Yes, I did.
And what were the outcomes of those subsequent proficiency tests?
Those were successfully completed without needing any additional remediation.
As far as the remediation was concerned, if you could just explain to the jury sort of what the issue was and what that remediation process looked like again.
Sure. So I received 4 items in hair and fiber identification. Each item was told that they came from the same source. Item number 4 consisted of 2 items. One was a hair with a root. The other was also a human hair with a root, but I had said the root was absent. That was due to the fact that I didn't see anything like that under the microscope. It was something that was new to me. My technical leader reviewed that hair with me under the microscope. She showed me various characteristics such as a loss of scale pattern and the soft appearance of the root, which I thought was damage. Because we had this discussion and I agreed with the different characteristics that she showed me, she then gave me several hairs, both with damage and with roots, so that I could basically continue to understand the difference of what I was looking at. Once she looked at all my notes and agreed with everything that I had done, she then issued me an additional test to demonstrate my continued competency in this.
Now, how many criminalistics cases have you processed over your time at the lab?
Over 1,000.
And how many scenes have you processed in regard to your work with the crime scene response unit?
I responded to approximately 150 scenes, 80 of which I was the lead investigator on.
And how many exams have you completed with regard to motor vehicles?
Approximately 65.
Now, if I could ask just a general question as far as blood testing is concerned, how is it that you test for blood?
Normally, I would test for blood by locating a visible red-brown stain or an area that may contain blood. I perform a screening test, which is not specific to blood, but other items may also come up positive for screening tests. If that screening test is positive, I go on to perform a confirmatory test.
And as far as the screening test is concerned, can you explain to the jury sort of what it is that you do in performing that screening test?
The screening test is a 2-step process. I take a cotton swab, which I apply sterile water to. I take that cotton swab and apply it to the area that I would like to test, and then I add my 2 chemicals to the swab. Depending on what type of screening test I perform, there'll be a color change, either blue or pink for blood.
And with regard to the confirmatory test, can you explain to the jury sort of what does that consist of?
If the screening test is positive, I'll go on to perform a confirmatory test, or again, a cotton swab is applied to the area of interest, or I may take a cutting depending on what the substance is. I then add a chemical to that cutting or swab, and then the liquid portion is added to a test card, something similar to a COVID, if you've taken a COVID test or a pregnancy test. The liquid is spotted at one end of the card and it flows up the strip. If there's 2 lines, it's positive. If there's 1 line, it's negative.
And through your training experience and work with the lab, are you familiar with a term called QLIM or QLIM?
Yes, I am.
And can you explain to the jury what QLIM means or how it's applied in
QLIM stands for quantity limited, which means that the sample, if it's being sent forward to DNA, would not be able to be divided in 2. Typically, we divide each sample going forward to DNA into 2, one to be tested in our DNA unit and one to be preserved for future testing. If an item is deemed QLIM, it means that that item, the entire item will be used up in the DNA processing.
Now, Ms. Harden, if I could turn your attention to February 2nd, 2022. Do you recall that date?
Yes, I do.
And on that date, were you dispatched to the Canton Police Department?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall approximately what time of day it was that you arrived at the Canton Police Department?
I believe it was approximately 9 a.m.
And when you arrived there, who, if anyone, beyond yourself, from state police or other sort of personnel was present at the canteen?
Trooper Proctor, Trooper Dunn, and Trooper Clark from Crime Scene Services Unit.
And at some point subsequent to that, were there other members of the state police that arrived in that area as well?
Yes.
And was one of them a reconstructionist named Trooper Paul?
I'm not sure what the name was. I do know that the reconstruction team did come on after I arrived.
Now, where within the Canton Police Department were you directed to go, or where did you go?
I was directed to the Canton Police Department garage.
And when you got to the garage, what specifically did you observe there, and what, if anything, were you asked to do?
I was asked to examine a black Lexus SUV.
And did you then examine that black Lexus SUV?
Yes, I did.
And you made certain observations of that, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Now, with respect to your observations that you made of the black Lexus SUV, was that memorialized in any way?
Yes, I took notes as I was examining it.
And you mentioned Trooper Clark as well, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And is he from the Crime Scene Services section within the State Police Lab?
Yes.
And what, if anything, was he doing with reference to the black Lexus while you were making your observations or while you were conducting your work?
I believe he was taking photographs. I don't know any other, I don't know what else he performed while he was there.
And Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm showing you a 3-page document. Just ask you to look down and help me finish. Do you recognize that document, ma'am?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
It looks like diagrams that I had taken at the scene. However, it appears to be missing some information.
So as far as the notes that you took, they're not memorialized?
Could stand at the podium, please. Thank you.
Ms. Harden, you had taken notes on those diagrams when you were at the Canton Police Station in the garage?
Yes, I did.
And that diagram that you have before you does not contain those notes, is that correct?
That's correct.
But as far as the diagrams that you had before you and that you were taking notes on, those are the diagrams or a form of those diagrams?
Yes, that's correct.
And contained on that is certain information related to the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Includes the make, the model, license plate number, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could just read from that form as far as what you recorded as far as the make, the model, and the license plate number.
The make is a Lexus. The model is LX570. The year was 2021. The registration is Massachusetts 3GC684. The VIN number is JTJF1AX1M434347. The exterior color is black. The interior color is tan. The registrant is Karen Reed, and the exam location was Canton PD Garage.
May I approach Jan, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm also seek to introduce and admit as an exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you.
Exhibit 137.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Harden, with reference to the diagram that you took notes on, do you have a copy of that with you today?
Yes, I do.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to take that out just to, as far as the testimony related to the diagram.
Okay.
And with the court's permission as well, I would ask if we could display what's now been marked as 137 on the screen.
Yes.
And Ms. Hartnett, before you, I believe, on that desk in front of you, there should be a laser pointer.
Yes.
Just click on the button there and point it at the screen if I or anyone asks you to do so with reference to the screen. So, Ms. Hartnett, with reference to what's up on the screen, the top of that first page of the diagrams, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what you observed and what, if anything, you made note of in reference to your observations of the black Lexus on February 2nd.
In my notes, I had the vehicle was in overall good condition, and there was damage noted on the rear passenger side area. So that's not viewable in this particular diagram.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down to the bottom.
So in this area here.
And as far as the damage that you noted in the right rear passenger area, what was it specifically that you noted?
I noted there was a dent.
Yeah, don't read from there. What did you note?
There was a dent in the trunk door. There were scratches on the rear bumper, and there was a broken taillight.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next page, please. Now, from the diagrams that are up on the screen right now, page 2 of what's been marked as 137, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to each of those observations you made and where they were in relation to the document.
The damage to the dent, the rear door was in this area. The broken tail light was here, and then there were some scratches on the rear bumper as well.
Now, in addition to scratches on the rear bumper on the area of that lift gate in the back, what, if anything else, did you observe sort of within that area of the bumper?
I observed an apparent hair on the rear quarter panel about here, and I also noted some pieces of glass on the rear bumper. Excuse me, I want to say apparent pieces of glass.
Now, as far as that word, when you say apparent human hair on the rear bumper, why that terminology? Why do you call it that at that stage when you're in the garage and you're making these observations?
At that time, I noted that it was an apparent hair because I had not done any microscopic observation of the hair.
And subsequent to that, did you do that microscopic examination of the hair that you observed in the rear area of that Lexus SUV?
Yes, I did.
And where was that performed?
That was performed back at the lab.
So that item was secured by yourself, taken back to the lab, and examined microscopically?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with reference to what you termed as the apparent glass on the rear bumper, similar to the apparent hair, why is it that you use that terminology when you're making those observations of it in the garage?
I did not have any confirmation that it was glass. We refer to it as apparent glass and preserve it for the trace unit.
And when you say reserved it for the trace unit, if you could, this in general terms, describe to the jury what the trace unit is and what is it that they do as far as their analysis in relation to what you do.
Certain items will be examined in the trace unit for identification. So the criminalistics unit does not perform glass identification. That would be done in the trace unit. They would also, they also will look at other items such as plastic and hairs, but I'm not comfortable going into the analysis that they perform. I don't have the details on that.
And lastly, Ms. Gilman, if I could have the third diagram within that. And again, Ms. Hartnett, what's up on the screen is that what you have before you as the third diagram,
Yes.
or the third page of the diagram. And what, if anything, of significance did you note in this area of the diagram?
I noted the items that were located within the vehicle. There were some boxes on the back seat of the vehicle. There was also a package in the vehicle and some clothing and miscellaneous items in the trunk.
Now, as far as the items that were contained within the trunk, how high up were they? Let me ask you this. As far as the rear window of the trunk area, was there anything obstructing that?
I don't recall at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, you can, excuse me, you can take that down. May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you initially a set of 18 photographs, just ask you to generally look at those, and I'm just going to ask you, generally speaking, if you recognize what is contained there. And ma'am, do you, generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photographs of the black Lexus SUV that I examined at the Canton Police Department.
And what's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed as far as the black Lexus on that date of February 2nd?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'll want to see to introduce the minutes and next exhibits.
No objection.
Your Honor, if I may, I don't mean to,
So Madam Court Reporter needs to,
I understand. So all I'm asking, Your Honor, is if I may approach just to show a couple more photographs while the court reporter is recording so that the witness may review them.
okay.
Are we done?
If anyone speaks before I'm done, it won't be on the record. It's 138 to 155.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission,
So, Mr. Lally, you really need to keep your voice up, and the witnesses.
yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish those photographs that have now been marked for the jury?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could start with 2498. Ms. Hartnett, you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is a picture of the license plate of the black Lexus SUV.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2499. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen, Ms. Hartnett?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the front end of the Lexus SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, next photograph, 2500. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen as this exhibit 140?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize within this photo?
It's the exterior of the Lexus SUV.
And as far as this is inside of the garage at the Canton Police Station, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In addition to the vehicle, is this a fair and accurate portrayal of what the inside of the garage looked like when you were there that day on February 2nd?
Yes.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gillen, 2501. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen there?
Yes, I do.
And which part of the vehicle are we looking at in this photograph?
Looks like the front passenger side of the Lexus SUV.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2502. And do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph as well?
Yes,
And which side of the vehicle are we looking at this point?
the driver's side.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2505. And do you recognize what's in this photograph, Ms. Harden?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this to be?
That's the rear driver's side of the black Lexus SUV.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 2506. Do you recognize this as well?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this?
That's the rear of the black Lexus SUV.
As far as the caution tape that's up and around the vehicle, is that something that was around the vehicle at the time that you first came into the garage?
Yes, it was.
Now, from this photograph 2506, which is exhibit 145, using the laser pointer before you, if you could draw the jury's attention to the damage that you were talking about, or where you observed that located on the vehicle.
There's damage here on the bumper, and there was also damage to the rear door. I think it may be blocked by the caution tape.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2508. So looking now at what's been marked exhibit 147, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in a little. Now, with reference to the damage that you were talking about that may have been blocked by the caution tape in the prior exhibit, do you see that in this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And if you could, again, using the laser pointer, before you draw the jury's attention to where in this exhibit you observed that damage.
Right here. It's on the rear door, right underneath the window.
Now, Ms. Hartman, as far as crime scene response is concerned, when you're doing this kind of examination of a motor vehicle, can you explain to the jury sort of what that process entails and what is it that you're doing over the course of your examination?
I complete an overall visual examination of the vehicle, noting any damage or anything that stands out that should be recorded. I then look for any stains or material that is on the vehicle, specifically any transfer that could have been left behind by a victim.
And as far as making those observations, what, if anything, do you then do with regard to those observations that you made from the visual inspection?
I'll then perform testing on any stains that I did, note or any areas of interest, and then collect anything that needs to be collected.
Now, with respect to this vehicle and this examination, what is exactly that you were requested to examine?
I was informed that this vehicle may have been involved in a hit and run, so I was requested to examine it for biological material.
And what, if any, information were you given upon arrival to the Canton Police Department in regard to that vehicle?
I was informed that the victim had scratches on his arm, as well as the fact that the car had been towed through a blizzard.
And did you perform any testing with relation to the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
And what was that testing that you performed?
I performed blood screening on the lower lying areas of the undercarriage, on each side of the tire flap, as well as the edge of the bumper and the exhaust pipe.
And what were the results of that testing that you performed there in the garage?
Those were negative.
And what, if any, evidence did you collect while you were either from the vehicle or from any other source while you were at the Canton Police Station that day?
I collected the apparent glass from the rear bumper. I collected a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear door. I also collected a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear bumper, as well as the apparent hair from the rear quarter panel. And I collected the taillight housing from the vehicle.
And turning away from that just for a moment, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for photograph 2512. And Ms. Harden, direct your attention up on the screen what's been now been marked as Exhibit 150. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what, if anything, of significance in relation to items collected or items that you observed, do you observe in this particular photograph?
I observed the apparent glass on the rear bumper.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2515. And again, up on the screen, what's now been marked as Exhibit 153. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Now, as far as that area that you were talking about where you recovered, which you termed initially in the garage as an apparent human hair, do you see the location of that within this photograph?
Is it possible to zoom in a little bit on the area right next to the rear tail light?
Gilman, if you could.
To the best of my recollection, it was in this area.
Now, as far as areas where you observe certain items or where damage is indicated or observed by you, is that later marked in some fashion?
I note the damage in my notes.
But as far as on the physical item itself, is that marked in any way, shape, or form?
Yes, I'll use stickers to indicate areas that I would then refer to back in my notes.
So that second set of photographs that I placed before you when the stenographer was marking those exhibits, do you generally recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
What do you recognize those?
These are pictures of the interior of the black Lexus SUV.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, the panel will seek to introduce in a minute. These just 4 photographs as the next exhibits.
Is there an objection, Mr. Jackson?
No objection to those.
One 156 to 159.
I'll take those. Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury as well.
Okay?
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2521. Ms. Harden, again, direct your attention to the screen. Do you recognize what's now been marked as Exhibit 156?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the driver compartment of the black Lexus SUV.
And if I could have Ms. Gilman photograph 2527.
Your Honor, may I have just a moment with counsel?
Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor, appreciate it.
So, Ms. Harden, direct your attention to the screen, photograph 2527, that's now been marked as Exhibit 157. Do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And what is depicted in that photograph, ma'am?
It's the front seat area of the black Lexus SUV.
And specifically, as far as the center console area of that vehicle, is that fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed inside the vehicle on February 2nd?
Yes.
And lastly, from this packet, Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2535. And Ms. Harden, it's 2535, which has now been marked as Exhibit 159. Do you recognize what's up on the screen there?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the interior of the trunk of the black Lexus SUV.
And is that fair and accurate portrayal of the interior of the trunk as you observed it in the Canton Police Department garage on February 2nd?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing another series of 9 photographs. Again, just ask you to look at those and look up when you're finished. But really, what I'm going to ask you is, do you recognize what's depicted in those? And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And generally speaking, what's depicted in those 9, that set of 9 there?
These are pictures of the rear passenger area of the black Lexus.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm also seeking to introduce and admit as the next 9 exhibits.
Is there any objection, Mr. Jackson?
None, Your Honor, thank you.
Well, you really have to keep your voice up.
I'm sorry?
You really have to keep your voice up.
I apologize, Your Honor.
It was 160 through 166 one. I'm sorry, 167. 68. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish portions of this for the jury as well?
Okay?
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2539. Ms. Harden, what's up on the screen is photograph 2539. That's now been marked as exhibit 160. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the rear passenger area of the black Lexus.
Now, as far as the damage that you observed from the broken taillight, if you could, using the laser pointer before you, direct the jury's attention to that, or what's visible of that in this photograph.
This area here is the broken taillight.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next photograph, 2540. Now exhibits 161. Again, Ms. Harden, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where you observe, if anywhere in this photograph, damage to the right rear passenger taillight.
There's damage in this area here to the rear tail light.
From the damage that you observed, it essentially wraps around from both the back and from the passenger side of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2554. And Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's up on the screen as photograph 2554, exhibit 165?
Yes, I do.
And talking before, earlier in your testimony, about some stickers or some sort of evidentiary marker that you would put on an item that you're examining, correct?
Correct.
And do you see any of that in this photograph here?
Yes, I do.
And could you direct the jury's attention using a laser pointer to where you observe that and what, if any area of damage or what that's to note?
There's a sticker here, and I know you can't see it. I don't know if you can zoom in.
You good, Ms. Gilman?
There's a letter on the sticker, I believe it's A, that denotes that there's something there that I was going to collect. And right next to that sticker here is the apparent hair that I noticed.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2558. My apologies, 2556. And similarly, Ms. Harden, do you recognize anything in this photograph in regard to something that you had marked?
Yes, that's the rear bumper of the SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in a little on that placard. And Ms. Harden, in this photograph, what if anything is depicted that you denoted something sort of black or further examine at a later?
There's pieces of apparent glass here on the bumper.
Thank you. May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing you another series of 4 photographs. If you could just move those up on your pen. And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
This is the rear passenger exterior right below the tail light on the Lexus SUV.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Commonwealth to seek to introduce you as an excellent exhibit.
No objection.
So it's 169 to 172.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish some of these photographs to the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2573. Ms. Harden, again, photograph 2573, what's now been marked as exhibit 169. Do you recognize what's depicted in this?
Yes, I do.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what we're looking at in this photograph?
This is the area of the rear passenger side of the vehicle just below the tail light.
And Ms. Gilman, if I get past sort of towards the top center of that photograph, if you could zoom in on that area. Ms. Harden, do you observe another sort of sticker or placard that you placed in that area?
Yes, I do.
And what, if anything, is that in reference to?
I'm sorry, I can't see what the letter is on it, so I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
If I could ask Ms. Gilman.
So, Mr. Lally, when you read, when you put your head down to read, your voice goes down considerably. We can't get a recording of your voice, so you need to speak up.
Understood. Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2576. And Ms. Gilman, if you could, with reference to the 2 areas up on that, if you could zoom in that area. I'm sorry, first on the one below. Ms. Harden, can you see better there as far as what the sticker is and what you had noted there?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what you had noted in that particular area?
I noted there were scratches in that area.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, the one above. Thank you. Also, within this Exhibit 172, there's another sticker further upward on the vehicle. What, if anything, did you denote or observe in that particular area?
In that area, I noted the apparent hair.
Thank you. May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Another series of photographs of this asking the same question. If you could take a look at those and asking if you recognize generally what they are.
Next question, Mr. Lally.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. May I approach?
Yes.
Call will seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
No objection.
Okay, thank you.
One seventy-three through 186, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd ask to publish some of those photographs to the jury as well.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2558. Again, Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's contained in photograph 2558, exhibit 173?
Yes, I do.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to just zoom in a bit on the sticker in the middle of the screen. And again, Ms. Harden, what is depicted in this photograph?
That is a picture of the apparent hair I noted in the area.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2561. And for the record, this is exhibit 176. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in a bit on the sticker in the middle there. Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's depicted in this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the damage I noted on the rear door.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach
Yes.
the witness? I'm showing you a series of 3 photographs. That's those that when you're finished. And do you recognize those, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photos that I took of the taillight housing back at the lab.
And what's contained in that, those 3 photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of the taillight housing once you had removed it and taken it back to the lab?
Yes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Almost seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibits.
No objection.
Thank you.
One 187 to 139.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so, Ms. Hartnett, before we get to those photographs, I do have a few questions. So it makes no difference to me, but I think if we can turn the lights back. Thank you, Mr. Officer. Now, as far as the collection of that evidence that you collected from the vehicle specifically, how was that evidence collected? And again, you've received training in regard to collecting evidence, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the collection of evidence that you did in this case, was that in conformity with that training and experience that you have?
Yes, it was.
And so how did you collect those pieces of evidence from the vehicle on that particular day?
It depends on what the item was, the taillight specifically, if that, is that what you're asking about?
Well, first, let me ask as far as the hair, and then I'll move on to some other items, if that's all right. So as far as the hair was concerned, how was that collected?
I would have collected the hair with tweezers, put it in a glassine envelope, and then put that into a larger manila envelope.
And as far as those steps that you take, as far as the collection is concerned, what are some of the concerns for that, or why is it that you take those steps?
Prior to touching any evidence, I would put on gloves. I'm not sure in this case whether I used disposable tweezers or reusable tweezers. If I used reusable tweezers, they would have been bleached prior to my using them to prevent contamination.
And so each of those sort of steps that you take in your collection process, is that fair to say that it's in an effort to combat contamination?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to the paint chips or the paint standards from the vehicle, how did you collect those?
Those would have been collected with a disposable scalpel. I use it to scrape off pieces of paint from the vehicle, which are then put in a glassine envelope and a larger manila envelope.
And as far as the pieces of glass from the bumper area of the vehicle, how were those collected?
I collected those with gloves. I may have used tweezers, I don't recall at the time, but again, if I used tweezers, I would have used bleach tweezers or disposable tweezers.
Now, as far as that taillight assembly was concerned, how was that collected, or what, if any, issues did you have with regard to collecting?
I removed the taillight. Once I had the taillight housing in my possession, I did have trouble disconnecting it from the vehicle, so a police officer on scene did help me disconnect it from the vehicle so that I could properly package it.
And as far as what exactly was it that officer helped you do, or what, if anything, did he do?
I believe he just removed, helped undo the wires that were in the back of the taillight so that I could properly hold it and didn't have to place it down anywhere.
So you had two hands on the taillight as he was performing that, is that correct?
Yes, I believe I did.
And as far as the area of the taillight that you were holding, you were wearing gloves, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as far as that area that you were holding with your two gloved hands, did that officer touch any area of that part of the taillight?
Not to my recollection, no.
And do you recall whether or not that officer was wearing gloves himself when he disconnected that wiring?
I don't recall.
Now, as far as once you removed that taillight from there, what, if anything, did you do with the taillight there?
I put it into a brown paper bag and then transported it back to the lab, where I then properly secured it in a box with added cushion from additional paper to ensure that no additional damage was done.
Now, with respect to your time at the Canton Police Station, were you presented with any additional evidence by any officers from the Canton Police?
Yes, I was.
And what were those items?
I was presented with a broken drinking glass that was reported to have been recovered from the scene at 34 Fairview Road. I was also presented with several solo cups filled with frozen red-brown stains.
Now, starting with the drinking glass, what, if anything, did you do with regard to the drinking glass?
I packaged it in a brown paper bag.
And with regard to the cups with red-brown stains contained within, what, if anything, did you do with regard to that?
I allowed the cups to thaw, and then I took 2 sterile swabs, like something similar to a Q-tip, and collected a sample from the red-brown stains in those cups.
And then what, if anything, after you took the swabbings from those solo cups, let me ask first with regard to the solo cups, what were done with those?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So after you took the swabbings from the red cups, what, if anything, was done with the red cups?
I returned those to the Canton Police Department to store as they saw fit.
And as far as the swabbings that you took, what did you do with those?
I secured those in a glassine envelope in a large envelope, and then transported those back to the lab.
Now, After your examination on scene, you returned back to the lab, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what items of evidence did you examine first in this case in the laboratory?
I examined the apparent hair from the vehicle as well as the broken taillight.
Now, starting with the examination of the taillight, well, let me ask, in general terms, when items are taken by you back from any kind of scene or any kind of place that you're processing, and you bring them back to the lab, what is it that you do with them when you get back to the lab?
When I get back to the lab, I ensure that they're packaged properly, that they're sealed, and they're stored in the appropriate location within the lab. I also enter them into our laboratory information management system so that from that point forward, those items can be tracked throughout the lab.
Now, each of those, now when you come in with sort of a case, is there some sort of number or something that's associated with the case when you first sort of generate that?
Yes.
And do you recall the case number that you assigned or was assigned with regard to this investigation?
Yes, I do.
And what is that case number?
The case number at the lab was 22-2184.
Now, with regard to each specific item of evidence that's taken back to the lab and logged in, what, if any, numbers are assigned or associated with those particular pieces of evidence?
Each piece of evidence is given an independent lab item number.
Now, with respect to the taillight, that was labeled as 3-1, is that correct?
That's correct.
So with respect to item 3-1 or the taillight, can you explain to the jury the examination process that went into that?
Sure. I prepped my workspace by spraying it down with a 10% bleach solution. I also sprayed down any reusable utensils that I would need to use. I then applied a piece of butcher paper to protect the lab bench and prevent contamination. I would put on gloves, my lab coat, and mask before I examine any item of evidence. And then I took photographs of what the packaging looked like and then photograph of the piece of evidence itself.
And then from that specific item, did you perform any testing on that item?
No, I did not do any testing on the item.
And why not?
I was, due to the case history, there was no visible red-brown stains on the item, as well as the fact there was a very limited surface area for me to sample from. In addition, I was informed that the car had been towed through a blizzard. So given the fact that there was potentially very limited material on the taillight, if any type of testing that we do would remove additional material. So I made the conservative decision to take a swabbing of the item and send it forward for DNA.
And as far as that swabbing of the item for DNA purposes, can you explain sort of what the process is or how that's done?
Yes, we use a polyester swab, which is a flat spatula-shaped swab. I apply sterile water to the swab and rub the exposed areas of the taillight. And then that swab dries before it's packaged and sent to DNA.
Now, with the court's permission, could I publish for the jury what's now been marked as exhibits 187 through 189?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have first photograph 8970. Now, Ms. Hart, directing your attention to what's up on the screen now is exhibit 187. Again, do you recognize what's depicted in there?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
That is the taillight that I removed from the black Lexus SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 8971, next photograph. What's now up on the screen is exhibit 188. Again, do you recognize what's depicted there?
Yes, I do.
And what is depicted there, and what, if anything, is, in addition to the taillight, what, if anything, are you with regard to that?
That is the taillight from the black Lexus SUV from a different angle. I am holding up a ruler to show the scale of the item.
And lastly, photograph 8972, exhibit 189. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And can you explain to the jury what we're looking at, perspective-wise, and what, if anything, you're doing in this photo?
That is the back side of the taillight, and again, I'm holding up a ruler to show the scale of the item.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. Sorry, just one moment, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Hartnett, from your initial response to the Canton Police Department, you secured a number of different items from the Canton Police Station that day, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And those were labeled subsequently as items 3-1 through 3-13, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, turning your attention to item 3-6, that was the apparent hair, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in reference to your analysis with regard to the hair, that QLIM term that I asked you about before, QLIM, what, if any, significance did that terminology have to your examination of the hair?
Per protocol, all hairs that will go forward for DNA are considered QLIM, meaning that the entire sample will be used up during testing.
And with regard to item 3-6, the apparent hair, can you explain the examination process or what it is that you're doing with reference to that piece?
Yes. I take the apparent hair and I mount it on a glass slide using deionized water. I then put the slide under a microscope, and I'm looking for certain characteristics to determine if that piece of material is a hair or fiber or some other unknown material.
And as far as your examination is concerned in that microscopic analysis, what are some of the things or what are some of the characteristics that you're trained to look for that you observed in this specific instance to give you that determination that it was a human hair?
On the exterior of the hair, there'll be scales, and depending on those shape, it can help you determine whether or not the hair is an animal hair or a human hair. Human hair have imbricate scales, which look like overlapping shingles with a wave-like edge. That is what I observed on this hair. In addition, the internal characteristics of the item are looked at. Running through the center of a hair is a medulla, which is a channel. Animal medullas and human medullas look different in that human medullas will have sort of an amorphous shape, which means they don't really have any shape at all, whereas an animal medulla will have distinctive, or can have distinctive patterns within them. Also, the size of that medulla or channel that runs through the center of a hair in a human hair is approximately 1/3 the entire width of the hair, where in animals it may be much larger than that.
Now, as far as based on your examination of this particular item, this hair, what, if any, opinion or what, if any, determination did you come to in regard to that item that you examined microscopically here?
I determined the hair was consistent with the human hair with a root.
Now, as far as that item was concerned, was there any measurements that were done in reference to that?
Yes, there were.
And do you recall what the measurements were or what the length was?
I'd have to refer to my notes if that's possible.
Sorry, may the witness refer to her notes just in reference to that?
Yes.
The hair was approximately 7/8 inches long.
Now, with regard to item 3-6, the hair, did you perform any testing on that?
No, I did not perform any testing.
And why not?
The only type of analysis done on hairs in the criminalistics unit is a visual microscopic examination.
So where did the hair go from there?
At that point, I cut the hair into two pieces, one end that contains the root and then the remaining end of the shaft. The root end went to our internal DNA unit.
Now, it may be pretty well understood, but when you say root end versus shaft end, can you explain to the jury what you mean by those sort of descriptions?
The root end is the end that would have been attached to the scalp, and the shaft end is just the remaining outer portion of the hair.
And how is it that you're able to determine sort of the difference between the root end and the shaft end?
Through the microscopic characteristics under the, that I viewed.
Now, with reference to that item 3-6, the hair, were any decisions made in regard to what testing could or would be performed on those samples?
Yes, based on the criminalistics protocol, the root end of the hair would be tested internally in our DNA unit, and if potential testing needed to be done on the shaft end, that would be sent out to an external lab.
And do you know why that is?
We don't perform that type of DNA testing at our lab.
And that's something, are you familiar with the term mitochondrial DNA testing?
I am familiar with it, but I don't really have a full understanding of it.
But as far as your understanding is the type of testing that would have had to been sort of sent out to an external vendor, that would be, the type was mitochondrial?
Yes, that was my knowledge at the time, yes.
Now, at some point, did you have a conversation with regard to examination of the remaining items in this case sometime in May of '23?
Yes.
And what was discussed?
It was discussed that I would examine the clothing and some of the other items for biological testing.
And specifically, there was an item 7-18, which was a gray sweatshirt attributed to Mr. John O'Keefe, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, from that, as far as sort of an additional analysis or an examination of those clothing items, what is it that you were doing and what is it that you were looking for as regard to your examination of the clothing item?
I examined the item for biologicals. In this case, I was looking to determine if there was any blood present on the item. I also did damage analysis of various areas on the sleeve and the front and back of the item. I also took a trace collection from the item and additional DNA samples for that, additional skin cell collection samples from the item.
Now, starting first with, as far as that specific item, 7-18, the gray sweatshirt, what, if any, observations in general did you make when you examined it?
There were red, brown, and brown stains on the item. There was damage from the top of the shirt to the bottom of the shirt, as well as across each sleeve of the shirt. I also noted additional damage on the right sleeve.
Now, each of the areas of damage that you observed, similar to what we saw with the vehicle, were those areas marked as well?
Yes, I marked each of those areas that I was going to do further analysis on with a number.
And there were essentially 13 different areas on that sweatshirt that you had marked, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sergeant, just showing you a series of 6 photographs, and again, asking you to look at those and look up when you're finished. And do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are the photographs I took of item 7-18, the long sleeve gray shirt.
And those are sort of the preliminary or overall photographs, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'll move the seat to introduce and admit as the next exhibits. No objection.
Thank you.
Exhibits 190 through 197.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hardy, before I turn to these, I just had one follow-up question. And you had been talking about, or testifying about, sort of the difference between the root end and the shaft end of the hair. You had mentioned that the root end is typically something that would be attached to the scalp, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that would be in reference to a hair that comes from someone's head, correct?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. We don't perform body origin identification.
And so to that point, as far as the root end of the hair that was attached to the body at some point, whether it's the head, an arm, a leg, you don't know where?
Correct, I do not.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish some of these photographs for the jury as well.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have, excuse me, photograph 9789. Ms. Harden, I'm putting up on the screen now what's been marked as Exhibit 190. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the photograph I took of item 7-18. It is the exterior front.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9790, the next photograph. What's up on the screen is Exhibit 191. You recognize that as well, Ms. Harden?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That is the exterior rear of item 7-18.
And if I could have the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, 9791. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen now is Exhibit 192?
Yes, I do.
And can you explain to the jury what that is?
That is the interior front of item 7-18.
And lastly, not lastly, for this purpose, photograph 9792. And again, do you recognize what's up on the screen is Exhibit 193?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That's the interior back of item 7-18.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9795. Again, Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 194?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That is the exterior front of item 7-18, and it also contains markers that I placed on the item to note areas of damage.
And the next photograph would be Ms. Gilman, 9796. If you could zoom in on that one. Now, Ms. Harden, what we're looking at here, that's the right sleeve of the gray sweatshirt of item 7-18, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, starting with some of the 13 different areas that you labeled, this starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, and goes up through 9, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Can I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Partner showing you another series of photographs. Just ask if you could review those, look up when you're finished. Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are close-up photos of the areas of damage 1 through 5.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Come on, to introduce and admit as the next exhibits. No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Before we begin, Madam Court Reporter, Your Honor, if I may approach just to show the next series of photographs.
Okay.
It's 196 through 205.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish some of those photographs for the jury as well.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9811. With respect to what's up on the screen, Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's now been marked as Exhibit 196?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
That is an area of damage that I noted as Area 1 in my notes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have, excuse me, photograph 9812, next one. Again, Ms. Harden, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 197?
Yes, I do.
And with respect to this, what are you doing here?
That is a close-up photo of the same area of damage, Area 1.
And that has some measurement that you're taking with reference to the size of that damage, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you do that respectively with each of the respective areas that you noted on each of the garments that you examined?
Yes, I did.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9813. Again, this is area 2, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9815. Again, what's up on the screen is Exhibit 200. You recognize this as what now?
That's a photograph of the Area 3 that I noted.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9817. Now, with respect to what's now been marked as Exhibit 202, do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And is that the number 4 area that you noted on the right arm sleeve of the gray sweatshirt of Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9819. What's up on the screen is Exhibit 204. Do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And again, what is depicted in Exhibit 204?
That's the area of damage number 5 that I had in my notes.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
The photographs that I placed before you while the stenographer was marking the prior exhibits, do you recognize what's depicted in those?
Yes, I do.
And can you describe for the jury, sort of generally speaking, what's depicted in those, ma'am?
These are close-up photos of areas 6 through 11 that I noted on the long sleeve gray shirt.
And may I approach this retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth will seek to introduce as the next exhibits.
No objection.
And if I may approach the witness just to present with another set.
Okay.
Exhibits 206 through 217.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Harden, what's contained in these photographs now been marked as exhibits 206 through 217. Those essentially sort of the same close-ups and then a close-up with a measurement that the jury just saw in regard to what you had marked as 1 through 5.
Yes, that's correct.
And this is just 6 through 11 on that same area in the right sleeve of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to the photos that I just placed before you a moment before, do you recognize what's depicted in those?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are the areas of damage 12 and 13 on the rear of the sweatshirt.
Senora, may I approach?
Yes.
Come up and seek to introduce in a minute. Okay, just place these before the witness.
Two eighteen through 221.
Thank you.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish these photographs for the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9837. And Ms. Sargent, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 218?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the exterior back of the gray sweatshirt.
And the items marked, that you labeled as 12 and 13, are they depicted on that?
Yes, they are.
And if you could, using a laser pointer, just draw the jury's attention to where 12 and 13 are.
Is it possible to zoom in on the numbers? I can't read them from here.
Ms. Gilman, if you could.
So there's area 2 and area 12 and area 13.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9838. Exhibit 219 up on the screen, is that just a closer image of those areas you marked as 12 and 13? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, with respect to the other photographs that I had placed before you when the stenographer was marking those, do you recognize in general terms what's depicted in those?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are additional pictures of the sweatshirt in which I've also made some notations of areas that need further testing.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Come off the seat. Introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
No objection, Your Honor.
If I may, Your Honor, just place these before the witness.
Exhibits 222 through 230.
Thank you, Dr. Now, Ms. Harden, before I get to what's now been marked in Exhibit 222 through 230, if I could just ask you a couple questions in regard to damage that you noted on this item or really any item. What is the process that you would go through as far as classifying damage to a clothing item?
I look at the macroscopic characteristics of the area of damage, and then I also examine the area of damage underneath the microscope.
And so what would lead you to make that sort of classification as far as something is damaged?
I look at the overall shape. I also look at the fiber ends. For instance, a tear will have rough fiber ends and possibly separation of the weave of the fabric, or a cut, you have even ends without any fraying.
Now, are you able to tell from your examination of those fibers and of those clothing materials sort of what caused those tears and cuts?
No.
Now, are you familiar through your training experience with something called an ALS or an alternate light source?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what your understanding of that term is and what, if any, use it had to you in this case?
An alternate light source is a light that uses a different wavelength that enables visualization of some biological fluids that can't be seen necessarily with the naked eye. On this particular shirt, I did use the alternate light source.
And what, if anything, did you observe when you used that?
I used that light source around those areas of damage to determine if there was any biological fluids that were fluorescing. The ALS did not show any stains in that area.
Now, with regard to what you had labeled as sort of tears or cuts 1 through 9 that you noted, did you do any additional testing or collecting specifically from those areas?
I collected 2 cotton swabs moistened with sterile water around those areas of damage.
And why did you do that?
It was told to me that potentially the victim may have been bitten by a dog during an incident. So I was taking swabs of that area to be sent out to determine if there's any dog DNA on that area.
Now, is that kind of testing, as far as canine testing or animal testing, is that something that your lab at the State Police Crime Lab is accredited or authorized to do?
No, we do not do that type of testing.
And is that sort of sent out to an external vendor then?
Yes, that's correct.
And is that something that you had done on any prior cases or any previous situations where you had collected items and sent it out to a specific lab for animal testing?
I did consult once with an external lab on taking those types of collections, but this is the first time I've collected and actually sent something out for that type of testing.
And specifically in this type of testing and in this case, what lab were those items sent out to?
We use the UC Davis Veterinary Lab in California.
And as far as prior to collecting or prepping or doing anything as far as collecting samples from that, who, if anyone, did you talk to, or what, if any, direction did you receive in regard to collecting those samples?
I'll allow it.
I emailed Terry Kuhn, who is one of the analysts at the clinic, who aided me in how best to collect the sample for their lab.
And what you were directed to do as far as collection, packaging, and shipping, was that at the direction of the UC Davis lab?
Yes, that's correct.
And you performed those functions in conformity with what Ms. Kuhn told you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to those items, did you note, with regard to the clothing items, as far as the gray sweatshirt was concerned, did you note any stains on those areas? On that clothing item?
Yes, I did note stains in those areas.
And then what, if any, testing was done on those stains that you observed?
Can you be more specific what stains you're referring to?
So what I'm specifically referring to is the items on the gray sweatshirt, item 7-18, as far as any stains that you observed on there. Again, sort of moving on from what you had collected for the UC Davis lab, but in other areas of that item. Well, let me actually first turning back to that. So the item that we were talking about as far as where you collected stains from that were sent off to the UC Davis lab, which item were they collected from and where on that item were they collected?
I collected 2 swabs from the areas around the damaged areas on the right sleeve. I wasn't necessarily taking them from any stains. I did use the ALS to determine if there were any stains there, which I did not visualize. So I was doing that for potential saliva collection from that area.
And thank you for the clarity. I think that was me confusing as far as the questions go. So turning away from that area as far as the collection for the UC Davis lab, in addition to that, what, if any, stains did you observe on that article of clothing, 718, the gray sweatshirt?
I also observed numerous red-brown stains on that item of clothing.
And so with regard to those red-brown stains, what, if any, testing was done on those stains?
On each of those stains, I performed a blood screening test as well as a blood confirmatory test.
And are those the same sort of initial testing screening test you were talking about before, and then the confirmatory test?
Yes, that's correct. A different screening test was used in the lab than was used at the scene due to a protocol change, but essentially it's the same mechanism.
And was that with respect just to the gray sweatshirt, or were there other items of clothing of Mr. O'Keefe's that you tested with the screening test in the lab and a confirmatory test in the lab as well?
I examined other items of clothing as well.
Now, if I could bring your attention back to what's now been marked as Exhibits 222 through 230, Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish some of those photographs for the jury.
Okay?
And Ms. Gilman, if I could first have photograph 9841. And what's been marked as Exhibit 222. Again, you recognize what's depicted up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And with reference to your observations of the red-brown stains on that clothing or any other item of clothing, similar to the tears or cuts or the damaged areas that you observed, were those areas similarly marked with some sort of sticker?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it sort of the same linear path as far as numbering, or is it lettering, or how do you denote those?
For the red brown stains on this item, I use letters.
Starting with A and then sort of going through it, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have, excuse me, photograph 9842. Again, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That would be red brown stain A that I noted on the sweatshirt.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9843. And what's up on the screen, which has been marked as Exhibit 224, do you recognize that as well?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
Those are red brown stains B and C that I noted on the sweatshirt.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9844. What's up on the screen now is Exhibit 225. Those are stains that you labeled B, C, and F, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's just sort of a holdout version of that to denote where B and C were located on the sweatshirt, is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9846. And what's now up on the screen is Exhibit 227. And again, Ms. Gilman, if you could just zoom in a little bit on the stickers. And Ms. Harden, if you recognize what's up there on the screen as Exhibit 227.
Yes, I do.
And these are two other stains that you noted as far as D and E on the same item.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, with reference to the other photographs that I think you still have before you that I gave you when the stenographer was marking the last batch, do you recognize generally what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photographs of item 7-17, the orange T-shirt that was told was belonging to John O'Keefe.
And what's depicted in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed as far as the orange T-shirt was concerned in your lab that day?
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll welcome to seek to introduce and witness the next exhibits.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
If I could read these here.
Exhibits 231 through 241.
Thank you. Mr. Lally, we have a few minutes before lunch. Do you intend to display some?
I think maybe,
If you do, do it quickly. Do it now.
okay.
If you're not, we'll take a break. Jurors, we're going to take the luncheon break. I'm going to see Counsel at 10.
All rise for the court, please.